This is someone who was never satisfied to fill his giant hole. I don't think they really care about everyday Joe and Jane, saying that it's like a piece of toast. It's absurd. That is a complete joke. Welcome back, guys. Always great to see you. So on Friday, I started making this video where Sassoon gives the rebuttal closing argument. They get to speak twice, whereas the defense only spoke once. And Mark Cohen even pointed that out in his closing defense argument. Okay, so I'm going to get started because there's actually a couple of funny things that happened even by Sam's defense team before Sassoon even got to speak. So Sassoon, Danielle Sassoon, the amazing prosecutor that basically slaughtered Sam during his testimony, she has likely come out as the only lawyer that essentially has really stood out because, of course, she just delivered knockout after knockout blows against Scam Sam. And they were hard-hitting blows, deep, sharp, and absolutely just demolished Sam on the stand. So I'm going to go over the last closing arguments, which were hers. Now, Sam's defense team has two famous white-collar criminal lawyers, and of course all the assistants and associates that work at their law firms. That's Sam's defense team, even though at times it seemed like there was nobody there defending Sam because it was just so bad. It was so pathetically poor. It was hard to imagine someone was actually even working for Sam. The only witness for his defense was just himself. I think kind of crazy. But anyways, so Mark Cohen being one lawyer and the other one being Everdell, that's the guy who defended Madame Epstein. So as Judge Kaplan is talking about jurors and how they should get home past 8 p.m., Sam's defense team, lawyer Everdell, he jumps in and says, "We have a problem with the indictment." What? We have an issue with the indictment, with Judge Kaplan basically saying there's nothing like waiting for the very, very last minute to claim there's a problem with the indictment. I mean, come on, what a joke. What a joke of a defense. With Judge Kaplan essentially dismissing the whole claim by Everdell and just saying that this is not even a matter of controversy at this point. Bring in the jury, let's get going. Alrighty, so Danielle Sassoon, Assistant U.S. Attorney, she gives her closing rebuttal. So from now on, she's saying all of the following. When you tell your customers to trust you with their money, and then you take their money and spend it all on yourself, that is not a reasonable business decision. That is simply fraud. You've heard time and time and time again from Sam's defense that the U.S. has the burden, that it is the only party with the burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt in this case. We have embraced that burden and we have met the burden. You can scrutinize the defense. You can scrutinize the defendant, where his testimony just did not match up. It does not ride on terms of service. The fraud does not ride on terms of service. That was a lie. With the defendant taking the stand, you can scrutinize him. Everything is in his representations and misrepresentation, his tweets, his congressional testimony, his asset managing policy, his investments, the code bug. That is a complete joke. This is someone who thought he could become the next president of the United States. This is someone who thought he should be the next president of the United States. This is someone who was never satisfied, not satisfied with a crypto trading firm called Alameda. He wanted an exchange. He wanted to go as far as crushing his rival, Binance. Why? Because he wanted influence and power. All of this consolidated, wanting to present himself as legitimate. His defense lawyers, his defense team, they had no excuses whatsoever. Mr. Cohen, his defense team, they argue that all that happened in 2022, all of that happened with Sam raising enough money for all of this. That is not true. That was a lie. They had bought out Binance before, utilizing massive secret transfers of money and crypto from Alameda. They lied to financial auditors. The defense team, the defense lawyers, the defendant himself had zero excuse, had no excuses as to the balance sheets, the spreadsheets, showing the $65 billion credit line that was given to Alameda. Simply wrong. He knew the lines of credit, highlighted in the database, highlighted in the code. That is simply fraud. With exhibits dating back to 2021, highlighting conversations he had with Caroline Ellison, where they both agreed that they needed to use FTX customer funds. Here we show a spreadsheet prepared at the direction of the defendant, Samuel Bankman-Fried. We urge you to find him guilty, showing that Alameda owed $10 billion. Without answers, Mr. Bankman-Fried got desperate. We've all realized the defendant is a different person in private than in public. Don't fall for the lies. His romantic relationship with Caroline Ellison, an important factor to show you why he chose her. He had all the power, The power dynamics were off. The defense team claimed all the cooperators have lied, all of them. It's absurd. It's an absolutely made-up story. This is a desperate, outrageous accusation they had to make up. They had no excuses. If you believe any of the three witnesses, any of the three co-conspirators, Caroline Ellison, Gary Wang, Nishad Singh, if you believe any of them, just one of them, the defendant is guilty. Let's take Gary Wang, for example. The defense team argues that he leaves the Bahamas and then a week later meets up with government officials and then confesses. Take Caroline Ellison's testimony. She told you this was the worst month of her life, just waiting to get caught. Taking Nishad Singh's testimony into account, where different people play different roles in the whole conspiracy. He didn't work at Alameda. He went as far as talking about confronting the defendant, confronting Sam Bankman-Fried. He went as far as talking about his suicide, becoming suicidal, all because of this, the fraud. The cooperating witnesses, all of their testimonies was complete and consistent, that all of this was at the direction of Sam, that all of this was the defendant's spending, all at his direction. Caroline described alternative number 7, balance sheet and spreadsheet. Remember the all hands meeting. You should even consider the cooperators' demeanors. They were all consistent. I know it's been a little while since their testimony, but they were all consistent. They were the same during their testimony and during their cross-examination. The defendant, on the other hand, he was direct and concise during direct testimony, offering definitions and even remembering detail after detail. Then during cross-examination, his story completely changed. His demeanor completely changed. By contrast, Caroline Ellison's testimony during cross or direct did not change. The defendant went as far as dazzling the media, even Congress. But they want you to believe, they want to argue that now he was clueless. He didn't know the code, that he never looked at the database, that somehow he was authorizing ginormous expenditures without knowing anything. That was a lie. Just think of June 2022. Things were crashing left and right. Valuation going from $40 billion to $10 billion. But somehow, the defendant in charge of everything did not look into anything. The bug, the 7 spreadsheets, he didn't bother looking at the code bug. That was a lie. He never bothered to look at the 7 spreadsheets, the 7 balance sheets that he directed. It's absurd. It is absolutely absurd. Where somehow he finds a $10 billion liability, a $10 billion hole, but yet does nothing, looks into nothing. That was a lie. It's an absolutely made-up story. If the customers knew what was going on there, nobody would put their money on the exchange. Looking at the evidence, it shows Alameda's balances, and it shows that they used the funds. His defense argued on lacking risk management. That is not a defense. That is pure strategy. If you're deleting messages, you're not going to be looking at risk management. It would be like going to a jewelry store and stealing and then saying it was done because there was no security guard. Simply wrong. Even if you believe every single thing that Sam Bankman-Fried said on the stand, he's still guilty of fraud. He was the hub of the fraud. We don't have to prove it was fraud from day one. We saw that in September of 2022, he tried to raise money from the Middle East to fill his giant hole, the massive, unrepayable hole. Judge Kaplan will tell you and explain conscience avoidance, and that's what the defendant did here, where one act of furtherance in the conspiracy is enough. When the defendant said that FTX had enough to cover all customer holdings, that was a lie. That was taking into account illiquid investments that were not actually on the exchange itself. They went as far as saying in private on the messages that they had about 1/3. The evidence show that. The defense claims just because they deleted the tweet that it wasn't a lie, that it was okay. That is a joke. That was a lie. That is him tricking the customers and then destroying the evidence, going as far as even making false statements to the press, defending himself. He thought he could never be caught, even going on Good Morning America for the exact same reason as to why he wanted to post a confident tweet thread. That is a complete joke. He thought he would never get caught. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for the lies. You know better. He didn't bargain for his 3 loyal deputies to take the stand and tell the truth. And with that, he's been exposed. And the time is now to deliberate without any fear. We urge you to find him guilty. Danielle Sassoon. She did well. She did well. A lot punchier, I thought, than the male prosecutor. Okay, so with that, Judge Kaplan talks to the jurors. He tells them that the defendant has pleaded not guilty, saying that the burden is on the prosecution, and he goes over the different charges. Here's an interesting note. Judge Kaplan says the government need not prove that the victims actually were harmed. It says that they only need to prove the defendant contemplated some harm. Interesting there. The defendant need not have participated in the scheme from the beginning. Judge Kaplan also saying that a lawyer's involvement in the scheme does not in itself constitute a defense, and that intent may be inferred from circumstantial evidence. He goes on to say that for charges 2 and 4, it is sufficient if 2 or more people came to a common understanding to violate the law, co-conspirators, saying that someone having mere presence in a scene of a crime in itself, or being friendly with the criminal, is not in itself a crime. For example, he says, I love trial movies, but that they're wrong on circumstantial evidence. He says that it's of no lesser value than direct evidence, and of no lesser value than testimony, saying that it's like a piece of toast, because you can still accept half of the toast. Interesting analogy there. Now, in relation to the Sam Squad testifying against Scam Sam, he says, it is of no concern to you why the government made plea deals with them. You should only assess their testimony and motivation. Pretty interesting there. He adds that there's absolutely nothing improper about a witness speaking with a lawyer prior to his or her testimony. Judge Kaplan says that Scam Sam is not on trial for campaign finance violations or for trying or bribing the Chinese government officials. So, another interesting note, he tells the jurors that you are not to indicate or inform as to how they're divided unless the judge asks for it. That's pretty interesting. Alrighty, so that happened around 1:30, and then they went to deliberate all the way up until about 8:15, when the verdict came in. Guilty on every single count. And there you have it. The very last day of Scam Sam's trial. So I'm curious to see how many years he gets sentenced behind the slammer. For example, just a couple of days ago, this guy, Benjamin Ackerman, he was sentenced to 30 or 31 years. But in California, we've all seen the videos of the people running out of stores with thousands and thousands of dollars worth of merchandise. And of course, you know, and they all kind of just get away with it. But this guy stole from the rich and famous, and he gets 31 years. 31 years. Stealing jewelry, memorabilia, some artwork, blah, blah, blah. But seriously, 31 years. He should have just gone to the jewelry stores and taken their stuff, you know? He would have been out scot-free. It's crazy. Hence the multi-tiered justice system. So if that guy gets 31 years, what the hell would Sam get? So I started reading the lawsuit from FTX Bankruptcy Court directed against the parents. And let me tell you, there's some info in there that is actually pretty shocking that I've never ever heard before. So just like the video dealing with Daniel Friedberg's lawsuit with FTX, how they detail Daniel Friedberg's involvement with Sam, with Joe Bankman, with FTX, with Alameda. So for the sake of completing the full circle, solving the mystery as to how deep the Scam Sam family goes. So I'll be going over that lawsuit in the next video, or maybe the one after. All the rich friends that he had, that he made, all the people that he donated to. You would think, at least I thought, maybe they were going to let him off on a couple of the counts. But I suspect they really threw the book at him because, of course, he defrauded not just everyday Joe and Jane. I don't think they really care about everyday Joe and Jane. He defrauded some of the biggest multi-billion, multinational companies in the world, including Apple, Netflix, even the US Treasury Department, the Bank of Japan. All these mega corporations and government institutions had somehow invested in FTX, which is absolutely astonishing. So I think that's why they threw the book at Sam. That has to be. So of course the big plus is we all got to see just a little bit of justice take place. Just a little tiny bit though. It's a positive thing. So gotta take the wins when you can, right? All right, guys, well, always a pleasure spending time with you. Thanks so much for following along. Again, please don't forget to smash the like if you haven't, subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you in the next one.